Hey everyone, and thanks for joining me for another great conversation. As always, I appreciate you guys. This next conversation was an eye-opener to say the least, because as a society, I feel that we're not prepared for the worst things that to come. If you needed any proof of that, then 2020 would be the year that would prove that to all of us. Most likely, if you're listening to this, you weren't prepared. Not many of us were. So I introduce to you the very smart and very forward-thinking James Walton. This heater going in the background. All right, brother. So we're recording officially. And like I said, I do the intros after. So
cool.
Well,
thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, no, James. Thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you reaching out. Like I was just telling you before we started recording, I am genuinely just interested in, prepper overall, people that prep for a situation. Now, is doomsday prepper appropriate, or is that one of those things that gets misused?
I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a doomsday prepper was a word that was created by a TV show. So that wasn't created by our community. But there's definitely an element of, prepping for the worst of the worst case scenarios in what we do also. So, okay. That's definitely a part of it.
Yeah. Now, when did this all begin for you? Like, was it something that, your family did? Your family was aware of, impending disasters, or as you got older, did you get into it? What was it? Where all of this started, this prepping?
Yeah. So I was always a big on end of the world movies when I was a kid, loved them. I would go to the movies and see all the alien flicks. Obviously, growing up in the 90s, Terminator fan, and, Terminator's built around basically a nuclear apocalypse. That's what the whole story kind of centers around. So that was always kind of like a fun comic book kind of level thing in my head. But I was pretty much just free ranging until about 25 years old. I had got married early, luckily met the right woman early. That didn't do it. Had my first son, and we got hit by a hurricane, which was new to me, because growing up around Philly, you don't get hit by hurricanes. It's just something you don't deal with. We got hit by this hurricane in 2011. Irene was her name. And I remember he was a month old, so we were new parents. He was a month old. I didn't even know how to hold him yet. I remember changing the diapers and feeling like you're going to pop a leg off, It's like, does this thing just pop off? I got to be gentle here. Yeah. Now I'm 10 years in with two boys, and it's like, I'm on a top floor. You could throw them out this window and they just run up the steps and say, do it again.
Right. They bounce back.
Yeah. Throw me again. But, so that was an eye opener, because though I had a wife and, responsible with my career and that kind of thing, I was living a weird bachelor-esque kind of life, you know what I mean? Which was I was a homeowner, but I didn't have any tools. I was living in a house. I had no food, it was just, I was in this really weird place. And that hurricane, we got the power shut off for like 2 weeks. Couldn't get out of the neighborhood for the first few days because of trees down all throughout our neighborhood. Wow. And that was really the eye opener for me. I didn't even know what preppers were yet. But I knew that I had to step my game up for sure.
Yeah.
So I didn't make the connection between like where I'm at now and the things I'm preparing for now back then. It wasn't like, oh God, this hurricane's opened my eyes to the facts that the whole economy could collapse out from under us. But yeah, I made the early connections then and there for sure.
Well, it sounds like you noticed that you were extremely unprepared.
Oh God. Yeah. Looking back, it makes me nervous.
Yeah. And I bet it makes me nervous just listening to it. I've never actually had to go through one of those natural disasters, but every time, I see one,
you lived through 2020.
Yeah, good point. But I'm one of the ones, if you listen to any of these previous episodes, I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess, where I'm not far enough to believe that it was fake, but I will go far enough to say is that when I looked around me, what I was seeing was not what was being reported.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like, I could call it a doomsday scenario in a sense, because businesses were closing and all that stuff, but not much changed for me as an individual.
Good. That's
good.
How
about you? How did 2020 go for you?
I live a weird sordid life, man, because of what I do. So
Okay.
it's like,
Right.
you know, the way I really make money is through writing in this niche. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I do a lot of writing for blogs and book writing and that kind of stuff in the prepping and survival and outdoors world. And unfortunately, when the world goes haywire, it's great for me. So it's a
Right.
really weird thing. It's like the bottom falling out of the stock market over there. It's gonna be a good month.
Yeah, but that's what you're because you're prepared, literally by definition.
Yeah,
You're
but
prepared for
also
this,
the demand for the content that I write goes way up. You know
for
what I
the
mean? So a
information.
lot of clients pop up like, "Hey, what are you up to? Can you write
Yeah,
me an
yeah,
article about what to do about this or that?" So yeah,
that's
it's
interesting.
weird. But it's a great hedge, man. It's a great hedge, going into a year like that where I knew a lot of guys who were struggling to keep businesses open. And I had no doubts that we were going to be fine so long as my wife didn't lose her job.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. So, all right, so let's circle back a little bit for the listeners that don't know what a prepper is. Can you give me the
Sure.
definition of what a prepper is?
Yeah. I mean, textbook is like somebody who prepares to make sure that their day isn't interrupted by unforeseen, outcomes
Okay.
or circumstances. You know what I mean? It's just a
Yeah.
person who, because I think a lot of people are more prepper than they believe, and a lot of people are thorough preppers and, just don't want to be called a prepper. There's nothing wrong with that either. It's
Right.
just a name like anything else, but it's really just being ready for, I'm sure when it comes to snow, if you live in Massachusetts, you got some prepper tendencies built into you.
Yeah, I do.
Just
Yeah.
the snow's going to come. It's winter. I got shovels. I got salt. I got cat litter, whatever, however you do it. That's a level of preparedness right there.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
I do
now,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, so from a outside of a dictionary kind of definition,
Mhm.
it's really, you find yourself on a path that is pushing you further and further towards what we call self-reliance and independence, which is just not necessarily wanting to be isolated and by yourself, but if you wind up being that way, you have created as many of your own inputs as possible. From a food standpoint, from a water standpoint, from first aid, down and down the list, right? You can answer the questions of chaos if they come to be. You know,
Yeah, would that be the same thing as just being a sovereign individual? Is that same
a lot like that. Yeah, a lot like that. Except it maybe a little more, maybe taking a little more action on the front of you know how you run the house. Like we more to come from your own back than to be conveniently delivered to your front door. How do you heat the
Yeah.
home might be a little different than how you power things with solar panels. Going and getting your breakfast in the morning from a chicken coop rather than a carton of eggs. Those
Yeah.
types of things. I mean, they're built into that prepping mindset also, because there's definitely a level of stuff that you buy and then stuff that you do. Stuff that you buy to sort of fortify in a disaster, and then stuff that you do day to day to that is also to fortify, but really also makes life pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I actually talk about this in a different. I didn't know it was prepping NSA, but I've been telling a lot of people, especially what you just brought up, like the stock market eventually collapsing and where it looks like it's heading. And I try to tell people that the more we're less dependent on these big services. Like I work in a
Sure.
hospital, but big pharma, the banking system,
Hmm.
all these things, the more better off we'd be. And then I also try to tell people that one of the best, but one of the worst things human beings ever did was create a home. It's great because it keeps us warm, right? It protects us from the outdoors and all that. But then again, it leads to this new type of world we live in where, like you said, everything gets brought to our door. We don't have to go outside. We don't worry about where the water comes from. We don't worry about any of
Hell
that
yeah.
stuff. And I think that's a handicap, especially in a world like, last year, 2020, when it seemed to
Sure.
be going downhill very fast.
I call it I actually just posted a video. I just posted a video on this today on YouTube, and it was titled "The 100-Year Amnesia," because that's what I call it all the time, is the 100-year amnesia. That's what we went through as a people. You know what I mean? About 100 years ago, we got not just the industrial revolution, but the convenience revolution. And what is astounding to me, and I probably should write a book about it one day, is how we went from the Neolithic age on up to about 1930, 40, and survival and preparedness and homesteading and you know, agriculture and all that was just, it had to be woven into your life in order for you to survive. And then in that short 100 years, we forgot everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We forgot, except for maybe a little minuscule garden in the backyard. The vast majority of Americans just like, I don't know anything about anything. I don't know what those trees are. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get on the phone and I have the food delivered. I mean, a lot of an astounding number of people don't even know how to cook, which is amazing to me. You know, it's
That's
like,
insane.
I don't even know what to do with this group of ingredients to make it so that I can eat it.
Yeah, that's insane when you think about it. So how much of the philosophy do you think of being gullible, right? Especially in a world with false media and false information.
Sure.
You know, would you, if you can you compare the philosophy of a prepper to a philosophy of a person that's pretty much zombied out and living a typical life? Like,
well, that's definitely part of the entry fee. You know what I mean? To become a prepper, you have to see through a lot of stuff because convenience is easy and attractive, you know.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who are hung up on it, who are they know in their heart of hearts, maybe they're a little more convinced now after this year, but before this year, a lot of people who are convinced in their heart of hearts that things didn't look the way they should, but were reluctant, man, just super reluctant. And I think it's because, as you know, you sound like a guy now that we've talked a little bit who knows the deal. It's a lot to look at. It's a lot to come to terms with. You know, it's just as easy as identifying one core problem and saying, you know what, if we fix this one thing, we're going to be fine.
Right.
You know, it's a monster. It's like pulling back an infected scab.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's just like, whoa, how are we going to deal with all this? So
yeah,
I think that barrier is what keeps a lot of gullible people gullible. You know, I don't think that they necessarily desire, but I think it's a hell of a lot easier to go to work all day. I never underestimate the load on the average adult. You know what I mean? I mean, I know there's lots of people out there who are very irresponsible, but the average adult, I think, has a lot to deal with already.
Yeah.
And the idea that now I'm going to come home and I'm going to spend time reading about how terrible things are going. And then on top of that, I got to pay all my bills instead, a little money aside to actually buy preps and start doing all the, you know, growing of things and, you know, firearms aspects and learning these skills that they might be so detached from, because I was so detached from a lot of this stuff, man. I was just a chef when I was 25 years old. That was it. Chef and a fisherman. And and the idea of taking on all this kind of crazy stuff back then was like, I just was so out of water, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big hump for a lot of people. And without the right kind of motivation, it's hard to blame them for not wanting to get into this thing.
Right. and the right information, right? Because I'll give myself as a perfect example. Same as you just said. Before last year, I basically, you know, I live Massachusetts, pretty blue state, pretty, you know, typical liberal state. So I was okay. And then I started getting information from a few buddies that was like, hey man, you know, you might want to take advantage of your Second Amendment, man. Hey man, you might want to be, you know, pay attention to these things. And, you know, I grew up in the mentality where it was like, you know, I really don't need that stuff. It's not really a necessity. So like you said, it's more of like me having to look myself in the mirror. Right. And then I saw where 2020 was heading and the information that I was getting. And I don't think I'm the only one, you know, well, I ran out and applied for my license to carry. Right. And I went out. Yeah, and now I'm a happy gun owner, and now my mental mindset on that and the Second Amendment has completely 180. I mean, I went from hey, I don't need that to who cares if it exists to oh hell no, motherfucker, we're keeping this thing around.
Well, that's a hard pill to swallow in and of itself, right? Is just to go from this mindset that like I live in a peaceful place, and why would I bring a firearm into it and mess with it?
Right.
To having to really come to terms with the fact that I got to have a gun. And historically, people without guns or without weapons have fared really poorly. You know
Good point.
Yeah. I mean, just really poorly. Like this, counting on the benevolence of men who are stronger or more prepared than you just doesn't work out in human society very often.
Right.
You know,
right.
I mean, this little section, we've been pretty good, but 1900 and before, good luck.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. A lot of things. We could go into the financial system after that. We could go into the whole, like, I want to know what it is that a prepper actually pays attention to. Like, because.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's me, then I'm paying attention to pretty much whatever the hot topics are, right? Like if the, presidential election was heating up or whatever, we were into that and all. But what do you guys really focus on when it comes to prepping?
Sure. Yeah. So, just as an example, because I think you brought up something that's really important for your listeners to understand. When I first got into prepping, I purchased, and this is even more funny because I was a chef for years, went to school for it, the whole 9 yards. There wasn't a lot of things that I couldn't cook already. Every prepping site I went to told me about silver because the dollar's gone out. So you got to have a way to purchase without the dollar. And every site told me that I needed buckets of hard red winter wheat, which is probably the only ingredient I've still never cooked with to date.
Really? Wow.
So the first two things it's basically just wheat in the raw state. You can grind it down and make flour, but It stays around forever. You know what I mean? It'll be there when everything else isn't.
Wow. Okay.
But anyways, a prepper author made it very popular and the prepper community ate it up. And you got to be careful of that is what I'm getting at, because if you read just in the prepper community, it's better now. It's way better. But when I look back, I say there are so many other things I should have done first. And the first thing I did was buy silver. And the second thing I did was buy wheat. And it was all manipulation. It was all me reading the wrong articles at the wrong times, getting scared, which happens when you start reading this stuff, that, and then just having to do something so I could sleep at night. So years go by and obviously you hone down the things that you actually need, right? And you start paying attention to the information sources that you trust. And the other thing that really starts to happen too that helps with all that is you get a filter of a network of people around you who you trust as well. Some of my favorite places to go when things are going crazy or when I feel like things are going to go crazy, I like to focus on places like Peak Prosperity. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. Zero Hedge. They're really cool websites, really good guys. Actually, one of my good friends, Samantha Biggers, she's a writer and a homesteader. Real deal. She is America. That's what I always tell her. She's just
I love
like,
it.
but not in the like American flag bikini wearing style of America. You know what I mean? If you ever get a chance, go to SamanthaBiggers.com and read her stuff, get to know her. She's great. But she just got a job over at Peak Prosperity, which speaks volumes of what they're putting out. But yeah, those two websites are great. We have at the Prepper Broadcasting Network, which is my podcast network, we have, 9 hosts there. Nice. So what I wind up doing when things get real wild is I'm sending text messages to those guys to see what they're talking about on their shows that week, because it's a wide range. We've got a 20-year military vet who taught nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare in the Army.
Wow.
So, that's a huge resource. We were Dave Jones his name's Dave Jones, the NBC guy. And he was just critical all through 2020 as we watched his virus, because biological warfare is, what a lot of people thought this was early on. It was like, is this what is going on here?
Yeah.
So, I've got personal contacts that are close that I like to take information from also. But there are two kind of veins when it comes to prepping information that's probably worth mentioning. You could go to a website like prepperwebsite.com, which sounds silly, but it's actually a great site. And you're going to get information that is skill-based. So like, in other words, you've identified that you're concerned about an economic collapse.
Yeah.
And you're going to mitigate that by maybe investing in silver and investing in long-term food storage so that you can eat and maybe buy the things that you need when cash doesn't work anymore. And going to a website like that, you're going to learn what kind of silver to buy right now. And you're going to learn how to make food storage, yourself, how to go buy rice, put it in a bucket, Mylar bag, the whole, thing to sort of build your own stacks of food in the house, which is probably, to you and your listeners, the thing that I'd be focusing on most right now. is stocking up on food for the long term, because the food, while it's not getting a lot of press, the food supply coupled with restrictions of COVID and COVID vaccinations are really weird right now. It's really a weird situation that's taking shape. So food is always high on the list.
What would be the long haul? Is there an answer to that question? What's the long haul?
Long haul? Well, the long haul has to be. So here's how I calculate the long haul and how a lot of preppers like me do. It all depends on where you're at from a food production standpoint at home. So there's some preppers, Dave Jones, for example, who has, what's Dave got? Dave's got goats over there. He's got quails and chickens, I think. So he's got meat, he's got eggs, he's got milk on property right now, right? So his food storage situation should be enough food to last him and his family until he can get plants going, canning, the whole 9 yards, right? So it really, your food storage is the buffer between the time you get all your agriculture set up, and you want, and it doesn't have to be like until your farm is ready to go, right? But you want to be able to say, like, we're going to add some chickens to the flock, or we're going to get chickens so that we at least have that protein each and every day. We're going to grow some kind of vegetables, some kind of food production or barter situation, maybe with a local farmer or with a neighbor who's a better grower. You got to set up that sort of new food supply. And until that new food supply is set up, you got to have food, Right. So whatever that looks different for everybody.
And I'm sure the amount of people in your family changes that as well.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge.
Interesting.
And so from the standpoint of skills, you've got that kind of vein of information when it comes to prepping. And I would highly recommend you go Prepper website. It's a great site, really straightforward how to do things. And then you have a great guy like Michael Snyder over at the economiccollapseblog.com. That's a guy I've been reading for years. And he takes these topics that we all concern ourselves with, but what he does, which is probably better than anybody, I think, is he cites them and he pulls direct quotes from other information, so it's not just his conjecture. Things are getting bad because of this. He'll pull direct quotes from police reports and from, other news sources. So you can really paint a picture and he's one of those guys. I read him and you don't even necessarily have to trust him. I do because I know him, but you don't necessarily have to trust him because he's got the information there from different sources. So that's a big deal if you're new to it.
That's definitely valuable. Yeah. So if I were to ask in 2020, at least, just to narrow it down, what were the biggest things, preppers were worried about, or the big thing, if there was one? Because a lot of things happening, I mean, with the Black Lives Matter protesting and the presidential election and the overturn the campaign and all that good stuff. What, the financial stuff going on.
Sure. Yeah.
What was on the top of your guys' list?
So in May 2019, we started the 2020 election preparedness campaign.
That early. Okay.
That was a week-to-week email list or newsletter rather that was a prepping action item every week until the election. You know what I mean? So it came to be in my head in May. I think we sent our first email out in October of 2020. And then we spent the whole year preparing for what actually turned out to be not nearly as bad as I thought it would, which was the post 2020 election. Now, something that happened here in Virginia is our governor tried to enact insane Second Amendment legislation at the end of 2019. So before coronavirus came in, we were all very wound up about the Second Amendment because, I mean, I'll give you a little taste.
Please.
There was a designation of about 50 or so firearms that were designated not by a committee, but literally by the people who crafted the bill, legislators, which, as you know, they know everything about guns, the common legislator, right? So they decided which guns were assault weapons, assault firearms, they called them. And it wasn't just AR-15s. It was certain types of shotguns, certain type of handguns. I mean, it was just an insane list. And the bill was proposed that, you know, by July of 2020, you can render these weapons to the officials, you can turn them over to the state basically, or you can face a I want to say it was a class 5 felony.
Wow.
Which was, I had never been so close to jail in my life.
Yeah.
Just from a bill. Just from a bill. You know what I mean? It didn't make it through and all that. But the fact that bill was proposed, and I remember reading through it and going, oh God, so July, if I don't turn the guns in, I go to jail. No questions asked. I mean, that was a bill that was proposed. There was about a 30 to 40,000 person march on the capital of Richmond on the 18th of, I think it was the 18th of January 2020. So we were all riled up about that. And then at the end of January, obviously the pandemic kicked in, and we were saying, we were very extreme in the beginning, man. We were super extreme in the beginning. We were saying, this, and it's all documented since we do podcasts, which is so cool. Yeah. But we were saying, like, don't go anywhere. Sam Biggers, the one I was talking to you about, she didn't leave her house for, I want to say 8 months. She never left. Wow. Yeah, I mean, she left her home to work on her property because they have grapes and goats and stuff like that. But she never went to town for 8 months.
That's insane.
And you got to be prepared to do that. That's not.
I was about to say, for a prepper, that must be a badge of honor.
That's not something you can just do because of conviction. Yeah, you got to be ready for that. Exactly. But we were all of that mindset. This could be the thing, because pandemic is one of those high level prepper doomsday scenarios that we worry about. Is the pandemic that comes and just starts killing, like the avian flu is a pandemic that has a 60% death rate. Yeah. So you get it. It's more than likely you're going to die from it. And that's young and old and everything. So we were nervous. We were nervous for sure. And kind of like you, over time, we started watching it and saying, stuff's not adding up now. We've been watching, and this doesn't look like what we thought it was. So pandemic took front row for a while. Obviously, we went deep. Man, I learned a lot that last year. We went really deep on intelligence gathering at the local level during the riots.
What do you mean by that?
So I can't remember what the hell I called it. I had a whole name for this thing, but it was essentially just how I showed the audience kind of what I did, because there were riots in Richmond for a month straight.
Okay.
And I showed the audience what I did when the nights that I knew were going to be bad, using an app called Broadcastify, using a map, like a standard Google map, and using Twitter, and basically watching the protesters, listening. Broadcastify gives you the ability to listen to mostly local fire chatter. Okay. Can't really get too much police chatter for obvious reasons. They don't want people to do terrible things. But you can listen to fire, and you can listen to some EMS. And between listening to where they were, watching where the protesters were, and mapping that on a map, I could very easily tell, are we in danger or not? Do we have to leave or not? Which direction is this protest going? Is it going to come close to us or not? So that became a real focal point for us through the summer was, these things aren't going away. State leadership's doing nothing to stop them. So night after night after night, people were scared and they wanted answers. So our answer to them was, this is how you can follow the action and make a good decision about, okay, honey, we need to pack up the car and get out of here because things are coming our way that could go south.
Yeah. I like that.
It really worked well. I mean, it worked really well. You could find out where the fire department was staging fire trucks, because they said that almost on a 15-minute basis. We're staged at here. We're staged at this street and that street. So you knew where they were. So that means they knew where things were going to happen. And then, everybody films everything on their phone. So you watch Twitter and people have the phone up showing what they're doing at the protest. Yeah. And you could find out which street they were on and how close they were to you, so it's a good tool for next summer. We've consistently had protests summer over summer, and I have to imagine that that's going to happen again this summer, regardless of who's in office. So it's a good tool. And of course, at the year really wrapped up with what could happen with the election,
Yeah.
And I think from a chaos standpoint, we got the better deal.
Give me more. What do you mean by that?
It would have been a hell of a lot worse, I think, had Trump won.
Why do you say that?
I just think that people would have been, so there were obviously problems with people accepting the outcome of the election.
Yes.
But the group that had to accept the outcome of the election took it a different way than I think the other side would have took it if they didn't accept. Because my whole thing from the 2019 on was no matter who wins in 2020, one side's going to raise hell. Because sure. We have been tricked, Jose, into this idea of being in the most desperate time ever.
Yeah.
Which is really a weird and nasty trick that has been played on us. So we think that everything that happens is the most important thing that can happen ever.
True.
And it's the most desperate time, and if we don't win this election, then the whole world is going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And that's both sides. I mean, both sides are in that mindset, which was what makes it so dangerous. But I just felt like if it went to Trump and there was any question whatsoever, that it would have probably been pretty bad around the major cities in the country. I mean, that was just my estimate from a year before the election or more. It was just, there's the hatred for the guy was so incredible that I couldn't see it working out. I didn't see it working out either way. I knew that no matter what side won, the other side was going to bitch about it. It's just what it was. But I think we got the lesser from a national level situation. But I don't know. There was Antifa was rioting in Seattle during the inauguration, which was really strange.
Yeah, a lot of strange.
I don't know if you've seen that, but it was kind of weird.
Yeah, well, I actually had to get I got caught up into the mix of it, man, where it was I was holding on for dear life until, election day in November. And then after that, it just started to get, closer, right? So I had personal friends that were, on the other side. And the thing with me is, and I know a lot of people say this, but I literally live this. I don't have a side because I'm a situational person. Like I like to hear the problem. I like to hear us play, and then I make a decision there and then. I know that sounds wishy-washy, but it's exactly how I feel. But what ended up happening was a lot of close friends were pulling me to the side that they wanted, and then those heated exchanges happen, right? Where you start to, relationships start to deteriorate because of words and things.
Which is crazy, right?
Which is insane. For people that, we don't even know, and for people that will never meet and that don't care about us.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So I say all that to say that by the time December came out, I was just, I was tapped out. I was basically whatever the hell was happening is going to happen. I kept hearing, like you just said, that, the world was going to end regardless. And then, everything, civil war, all this unrest.
Sure.
I don't know if any of that played out. I will say that I do think a lot of people have had their eyes opened because of all this lying and all this back and forth.
It's been good. We've definitely seen an uptick in the preparedness community for sure. They're paying attention. And the Second Amendment has really taken a focal point. I mean, the amount of background checks have gone up exponentially since August 2020 in our nation. And I mean, I haven't checked out the data in February, but yesterday, Joe Biden made an announcement that he's going to, go after the Second Amendment, essentially.
Again.
So that I wish. I mean, if anybody were around these guys, they would tell them, look, do it and don't say it. The moment you say it, you're the greatest gun salesman of all time. That's what I always said about Barack Obama. He was the greatest gun salesman of all time. He just he wouldn't leave it alone, and people were like, yeah. Buy and buy and buy.
Right.
So,
what do you think their incentive is to get this done, in your opinion? I've heard different opinions, but why do they want to get rid of the Second Amendment?
Incentive?
Why would they want to get rid of it?
Everything I think that goes on is multifaceted. And there's and the weird thing about sort of the postmodernist left wing or whatever you want to call it, there's a million names, is there's like this weird like alpha and omega to everything that they do, where in one hand you listen to them and you look at them and you think, you know what, they're compassionate people for sure, you know, or at least some large percentage of them are inherently compassionate people. And when that type of person sees gun violence perpetuated towards children in particular, you know, it has a serious effect on everyone.
Sure.
And it seems like they tend to hold on to it, and to credit them, it seems like they want to come up with the solution right now. Like, we need to do something right now so that this never happens again. And they do the same thing with climate change too, which I look at it I think it's ignorant arrogance, right? To assume that we probably can't, not to say that we shouldn't try and fix the planet and do a better job as stewards, but there's also probably a good chance that we have no ability to fix the entire planet. You know what I mean? It's a very arrogant thing to assume that just because we write stuff on paper and make people do things, we'll change the course of the galaxy. But, you know, in some ways you don't want to fault them for it, right? Because it's compassion and it makes sense. It's like, you want to stop this from ever happening again. But I think with the Second Amendment, they come at it from an ignorant standpoint, you know, where's this idea that a lot of them have never used a gun. A lot of them don't know people who have guns. So the gun itself is like this weird, scary thing that they don't like. So there's that side of it. And then there's another piece of the puzzle that seems like they're undeniably happy about the idea of certain people not having guns. Whether or not they look at them as a threat, or whether or not they just want them to be powerless and there's that devious side too, you know, which is
absolutely.
And I see that in a lot of the things that they want to do. It's like, you get the compassionate side, you understand why it's almost like the marketing aspect. You know what I mean? It's let's tug on the heartstrings with this marketing. But I think a lot of people are truly well intentioned. And then you have this other aspect of it where it seems like there's definitely something darker behind it, which is, you know, an unarmed population is just a population that is more easily controlled. And we know how to fix the problems. The people with the guns and the opinions are really getting in the way, you know, because that's what people with guns do. They get in the way of tyrants. And, you know, there's a lot of tyrannical stuff happening right now on the backs of problems that really on the back of fear. Right. It's like, pandemic, scared. Okay. All you have to do is everything we tell you and we'll be all right. Right. End of the world, climate change. We're scared. Well, just do exactly what we tell you and we'll fix it. And people with guns and opinions are the worst people to have around when you're trying to push those kind of agendas, because they not only can say, go to hell, but they can say, and if you don't want to go to hell, I can help you. You know?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's a weird thing, but it seems like that is pervasive. I'm not done yet. Good.
Yeah, I can see where they could try to, you know, like you said, if you lull people to sleep, you can abuse the power. And if, you know, the original amendment, if I'm not mistaken, was basically for that, to allow farmers to protect their homestead and the militia to defend itself if it needed to. But if the militia doesn't have any weapons,
it was written to assure that you don't have a guy to be quite honest, and this is not a fault of Joe Biden's. I saw it with Donald Trump and I saw it with Barack Obama. And before then I didn't pay attention to politics. I was too young, but that amendment was written to assure that you never have a guy who spends a whole day opening black books and writing laws into order that you have to deal with. You know what I mean? That executive action stuff has got to be stopped. And I don't care who's in office. It's just, that's a king. That's a king at work. You know, if a guy can sit down and decree with his pen 40 some odd actions, and the right has made a big deal out of 40 some executive actions. I didn't check the data, but Trump did a good deal. You know, he did a good deal of executive actions himself. And That's not good either way. Even if it feels like a win for your side, it's not a win for anybody if the president can show up and say, I'm just going to put 40, 50 things in action and you're going to have to deal with it, whether
Yeah.
you believe in it or not. It's very dangerous. So
Yeah,
that's really what that Second Amendment was designed for.
That right there should be the selling point to anybody who doesn't believe in the Second Amendment.
Yeah,
I never thought about it. Like, you hear, King George, tyranny, and that whole story of the revolution, and to think that person could literally just be sitting in Washington D.C. with a pen on his ass, changing the world. That's insane.
It's crazy. I mean, one of those was lit to stop. I mean, you can feel any way you want to feel about the Keystone XL pipeline, but one of them was to stop that, which is a massive industry in this nation and a massive aid to Canada and a massive effector of, I mean, you could argue Homeland Security, right?
Right.
If I have enough oil to fuel the American military, which is exponentially larger than any military on the planet, we're secure. You know what I mean? Good luck messing with America, who has full energy independence. But, it also affects your gas price. I mean, your gas price will increase because we've decided that we don't want to go forward with the EXL pipeline, drilling in different places in the nation, and trust me, it's not a cut and dry issue, but it's also not an issue that one guy should show up and decide on his own. At the White House desk
with bad information at times.
Sure.
For the most part. Yeah.
So that, that has to be avoided at all costs. But
so is it, are preppers, I don't know if this is the best description. Are preppers political? Like, is it like a hard reasoning, or is it more like, as long as you guys are prepared, whatever comes?
So you have to have an opinion, right? Because you have to. If you don't have an opinion, then you're never going to admit everything's has the potential to fall apart.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Good point.
And you also have to identify what we jokingly call the lizards, right? And that's just making fun of the lizard people that live on Mars or whatever. I used to have a friend who believed in that, and I used to run a pretzel bakery, and I would listen to George Norrie in the morning because I'd have to be to work like 3 a.m. to turn the oven on, and he would always talking about these lizard people up in the echelons of government. So we laugh and we joke and we call Bill Gates and those guys the lizards just for fun. But you have to identify people of serious power and influence who move the chess pieces, because they're out, they exist, they most certainly exist. And that's just something you have to be able to recognize. Unfortunately, they all seem to cheat to one party line in particular, which, I think the truth about politics in America is that nobody's really happy with politics in America.
Right. That's why I asked. Yeah.
It's definitely not it's not a right wing, left wing thing in this nation. We just been taught that it's that way, because if you grabbed a handful of people off the street and you said, hey, you happy with the way the government works?
Yeah.
Right now, with whoever's in office, you would say, no, it's corrupt as can be.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're fighting each other over who's president is really weird to me because of that. But but it is political. I mean, a huge part of prepping is you better have a way to protect the things that you invest in. Right. So you can have all the food in the world, the cool camo, the cool, all the cool prepping stuff, backpacks, whatever. But if you don't have a firearm to protect any of it, then the guys with the firearms are going to come and take it when the time comes, So it's hard to be a prepper and not support the Second Amendment, which then once you support the Second Amendment, you're a right wing,
Sure.
So in the eyes of many people, right? You're automatically right wing because you have an AR-15, and that's a scary killer weapon. Right.
Yeah. Well, I've come to find that my foray through getting my own gun and being a Second Amendment advocate is that I think gun owners are probably the safest people of all time.
Oh, yeah, most certainly.
Like I've been so surprised over and over again with not only the rubric, right, for like people coming on to onboarding to using a weapon and stuff like that, but the sheer right double, triple, quadruple checks that most gun owners have to go through in order to make sure that they have a gun and they're handling it safely. And I don't think the average person realizes that.
No. Well, it's hard. It's hard to understand.
Yeah.
Because you only see them in movies. You really only see the stuff in movies. It's like if you've never shot one. I mean, the only reason I wound up with one was because when I was about 20 or 19 or something, my wife and I moved into a really cheap, really great apartment in Wilmington, Delaware. And we had no idea where we were at, but we quickly found out where we were at and why it was so cheap. And I remember one crazy night standing in the living room and some unknown person was slamming on the door. And I had like a chef knife and that little bar that props up your bench that you bench press on, those were my two weapons. And after that night, I said, well, it's time to go buy a gun. We're in a dangerous situation. But had that not happened, I don't know how long it would have taken me to buy a gun, because I didn't walk around thinking like, I got to have a gun on me. Yeah. I just need to have a firearm when I was young. When the London Bridge attack happened, do you remember that?
I don't. No.
It was a white van. It was when the UK was having that tremendous problem. I think it was 2017, maybe 2016. Anyway, the UK was having tremendous problems with the world was having trouble with radicalized Muslims at the time.
Okay.
And this was an attack where they drove a white van into some people on the London Bridge. Then they got out and they had machetes and kitchen knives and they started killing people. They started cornering people and stabbing them to death. And I remember reading that, and I was already podcasting and all that at that point. And that was the day I decided not only do we need guns, but we need to carry them all the time.
Yeah.
We
definitely
need to get our concealed carry, because I quickly understood that I would never be standing in the corner of a market getting chopped up by any. You know what I mean? They're going to be shot. They will be shot,
So I'll give you my in Massachusetts, once again, liberal state. I'll give you my journey on
come to Jesus.
Not only the come to Jesus, but what I had to go through to get this thing, right? Which my buddy in Pennsylvania. My buddy in Pennsylvania laughs at this all the time. So I'm actually living in a city in Massachusetts where it's green light, right? Like, so it's a full license to carry, no restrictions, no nothing. So I'm lucky there.
Yeah.
So I went for my class in June of 2020. I had to get my appointment to go and do the fingerprinting and all that stuff and pay the $100 and all that 4 months later. So it was about August to September. And I didn't get my license to carry till the first week of this year of 2021.
Wow.
It took them literally about 6.5 months and probably a few $100 later for them to be able to get me my license to carry. And I don't know why. It should not take this long. God forbid anything happened during the presidential election, I would have been sitting there waiting in the freaking and the wind. And then now,
give me 1 minute, let me go grab it.
Yeah, exactly. And now, lo and behold, I've actually come into a situation where even buying ammunition has become
ammo's crazy right now.
Yeah,
that's no doubt about it.
I tell my dad what I'm finding ammo for now, and he's just like, "Are you crazy? That's like $10 a box." I'm like, "No, sir." No, it's not.
Man, I just wrote an article the other day for a magazine about asking the audience, are guns precious metals? Are guns and ammo precious metals now? Because that's what it feels like, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels like you could put them on the same boat as gold and silver right now.
Yeah.
And that's no surprise to me, really, but it's just a sign of the times.
Like you said, all the Second Amendment, newcomers, I guess, just kind of flooding the floodgates and trying to get in there. But I'm not willing to. I don't mind paying the higher price tag, but from what I hear, it's definitely a huge inflation there.
Sure, yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on because you as a prepper are seeing this economic downfall in a completely different perspective, probably a better and a safer one than I am. So this could be funny or not funny. So you're seeing it as when the U.S. dollar dies, you have to basically have food reserve and everything you need on hand to be able to go as long as you can. Me, foolishly or not, depending on where you think of, I'm thinking is I got to get a shitload of Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on
Well,
crypto? Any of that? Any of that
I mean,
storage
look,
of value?
I got a guy who's going on in 1 hour. They do a show called the Patriot Power Hour every Tuesday night at 8.
Okay.
And he's a super Bitcoin enthusiast. They're both preppers, obviously, but he's a
Nice.
super Bitcoin enthusiast. And hey, look, I think I I definitely kicked myself for not buying it, 10 years ago or whatever when I first saw it, when I
Sure.
thought it was the biggest, joke of all time. Um, but any if you go further enough down the river of something like an economic collapse or a deadly avian flu style pandemic, you're going to eventually arrive at a time where power and order are likely going to be an issue, and that's what scares me personally most about crypto is you got a lot until the lights go out, then you got nothing, so that's what makes
Awesome
me
point.
real nervous about it. I mean, if from an investment standpoint, if you're if you're trying to hedge your bets on financial collapse in the short term, I think it's the hard assets that make sense right now. I think it's things like land.
Yep.
Things like land can be had, and it doesn't have to be hundreds of acres at a time, but small plots of land will never lose value. Obviously, gold and silver. And, it sounds crazy, but anything that you can store that will eventually wind up being food or is food already is always going to be of value.
Yeah.
And there are little things, little super investments like children's Tylenol that is kind of a. Do you have kids or no?
I do, but give me that investment. I didn't.
Well, I mean, if you find yourself in an economic collapse where barter has begun,
Yeah.
And you find a set of parents who have kids with fever, with pain, they're going to go out of their way to get you what it is that you need if you have what they need. And that's one of those weird things that if you don't stock up on it, you're not going to stock up on it,
Yeah.
So if you don't have that mentality for those kind of things, then you're going to run out. And I remember raising kids. I wouldn't have wanted to be out, of Aura gels or any kind of pain reliever or fever reducer for my children. So, those kind of hard things are what I feel more comfortable about having. Another great one is booze, cigarettes. They're great. Prophylactics are great. Barter material. These things that people are going to do and probably have to do no matter what happens.
Right.
The alcoholics aren't just going to say, I'm done drinking thanks to this economic collapse.
Yeah, exactly.
These things will have exponential value, and those are the investments that I feel more safe with outside of Bitcoin. I think in the world that we live in right now, it's great. I think Elon Musk just bought a bunch of it or something like that.
Right.
It's a good deal. There's nothing wrong with it. And the, maybe the likelihood that the computers shut down and the lights go out for an extended period of time is a very rare one. And in the short term, having Bitcoin in place of the US dollar is probably a great hedge, in my opinion.
That's exactly that's exactly my place on Bitcoin. I wasn't expecting it to come and digitally save my life, but the hedge against inflation, this ridiculous thing of them the Fed's continuing to put, pump more money into this economy. And we all know what happens when that happens. And, typical 9-to-5 workers are not. They're toast, right? Their savings accounts are toast. They're sitting there melting away like an ice cube.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's my thing on Bitcoin. But yeah, you brought up a fantastic point, which is in the longer run, when none of that, when none of that stuff matters, you're gonna need some children's Tylenol.
Yeah, well, it's a scary one. When the lights go out, everything gets different, quick. That's one of the scarier things is that off-grid sort of situation. I don't know. I don't know if we ever see anything like that or not, but I know you should have some kind of a plan in case.
Sure, yeah.
Because if you don't, then you're gonna be. What should I do now?
With no weapon, by the way.
No gun. You can't heat or cool your home. So all your money was in Bitcoin.
And now it's all gone.
Right, and you can't get to the ATM either because that's off.
Right. So now that you say that, let's get into what's the checklist for somebody. All the resources you gave earlier, which if you don't mind, provide me with those links. I'll put them in the show notes.
Oh, yeah.
But besides all those sources, what would be your checklist or your starter's guide for somebody looking into prep?
Yeah. So we over at the Prepper Broadcasting Network always speak to a base level of preparedness. And this is for the brand new, right? You just walked into the you just came, I always say you just walked in panting and sweating because you just went through the realization that things aren't as stable as you thought they were your whole life. And now you want to take action, you know. Don't buy silver and don't buy hard red wheat like I did. That's a bad move. But they're basically six buckets that you can fill to the degree that you can fill them, and it
Okay.
will have a great effect. You know, that's why I like the baseline preparedness, because it's, you know, you can tell people you need a gun. Okay, what kind of gun? You know, and how much ammo and all. You know, it can get crazy. Every level of it can get crazy,
Sure.
and if you're lucky, you will get crazy, and then you'll really be ready.
In a good way.
But there are six buckets that you can fill, you know, as you go, to make sure that you're ready to withstand basically every disaster that happens on a regular basis, and maybe even radical things like the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. And it starts with food. That's number one.
Okay.
You know, if you would have, well, people were affected by COVID-19 and food, because the grocery store struggled to restock meats and things like that around the nation. But if it turned out to be much more deadly and much more contagious, you'd be stuck in your house, you know. So food is about, I'm stuck in my house and I can't go out for an extended period of time, but we still have to eat. Um, Water is a very overlooked prep, and that's number two. You want to make sure that you have more than just stored water on hand. You know, it looks like a lot of water when you have cases of bottled water, you know, hanging around. But when you break it down by gallons, and you break it down by, you know, 1 gallon per person per day, which is kind of the equation that you want to go by.
Okay.
And then you start adding boiling rice every night, boiling pasta, taking baths, washing dishes, cleaning the house, you know, all these things. The water goes away quick, you know. So however you want to go about it, if you've got a local water resource, if you've got rain barrels, you want to fill the water bucket somehow, you know, and make sure that you have access to water outside of the tap if something happens to the tap. And, you know, things happen to the tap here in Hopewell, Virginia, because of the ice storm that came through. um, the power was out to their water treatment plant. You know, there was damage to the treatment plant. They didn't have power, and you know, you get the message.
Yeah.
Don't drink out of the tap. Now you got to have an action plan. You know, and that's like a best case scenario thing. Couple days, I'm sure they'll be back on. You go out and buy water too. So food and water are huge. Backup power is one that not a lot of people think about. But you got to have a means to charge your devices. You got to have a means to maybe throw some lights on in the house, uh, heat and cool the house some way. A lot of people are suffering from not having a backup power solution in terms of heat right now across the nation.
Right.
We're experiencing Mother Nature's wrath right now, is reminding people they should be prepared. But you know, wood fire heat, kerosene heat, you know, things like that can be your best friend in times like this. So you got to have backup power, battery banks, solar panels, whatever you want to do, but put something in that bucket, even if it's just, we're going to buy a few power banks from Target and
Yeah.
make sure they're charged so we can charge our phone and know what's going on. First aid's another big one. You know, it's a really big one. Your average first aid kit is filled with crappy band-aids and stuff you'll never use. So not only having the band-aids and the first aid tools and gear, you really want a few good books around. You want a few good books around. The Prepper's Medical Handbook is a great one. Hard, you know, you want a hard copy. Forget about the ebook, because you don't know what the situation is going to be.
Yeah. It's going to go with your Bitcoin.
Yeah, right. The Doomsday Book of Medicine it sounds crazy, but it is a phenomenal medical book to have at home. And the reason prepper medical books are really helpful is because they approach things from the standpoint of an austere situation, right? So they're already in the mindset that you're going to get this book because things are really bad.
Yeah.
You know, you might not have water, you might not have power. Here's how you deal with these medical issues in that situation. So that's medical. Security is obviously a huge one, you know, and I say security rather than self-defense because security is all encompassing. It can be home, it can be, that kind of thing. But it's also down to the personal level. If you have invested in food, water, backup power, first aid, you want to be able to secure that. And if things get crazy, you want to be able to just keep your family safe. So security is a big one. And finally, evacuation. An evacuation plan is essential. And that can be
Nice.
as simple as, hey, we go to the Holiday Inn when it gets bad inland. We got a Holiday Inn that's 20 miles inland or whatever, and that's where we go, and that's our evacuation plan. We grab these documents, this gun, these things, we grab all that and we go. And if you can affect those 6 buckets, food, water, backup power, first aid, security, and have a go plan, an evacuation plan, not a bug out plan, it's a different thing, but an evacuation plan, you'll be able to answer to most things that are going to happen probably over the next, for the rest of your life, probably.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's an awesome set there. I'm going to have to enact and a lot of those into my life. I do basic stuff now. I got, extra canned food down here. I got a lot of extra water. I am trying to get more ammunition and stuff like that. But that sounds more organized. I'm kind of just like winging it. Like, I think I may need this stuff. Let me just get it. But I don't know what it is I'm preparing for. Do you have an array of ideas of what we can see in the if you were to take a guess, next 5-10 years?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, well, probably, and it's what I mentioned earlier, as far as food is concerned, no matter how things go, the cost of food is going to rise. And that's because the outside factors that affect food production are all coming into play. This pandemic has created a lot of restrictions on the way food production is going to be handled going forward. And, I spent a lot of my life in food safety. So the tracking of food is essential to stopping an outbreak. And that didn't mean a lot to people outside of food safety for a very long time. But now that the world's been hit with this pandemic, I think we're going to see a lot more restrictions on the way food is produced, and particularly with the tracking of food. There's also a tremendous push, and whether you like it or not, it's a tremendous push, but there's a lot of people in power that don't want you to eat meat anymore, and this is happening behind the scenes right now, but it's going to become a big part of your everyday life. I don't know how readily available and how affordable red meat and things like that are going to be, because it's just a push that's going to happen, with the population growth and the effect that, I don't know, I guess it's true, but the effect that raising cattle and their methane, their farts have on the on the world, it's apparently a big deal. And lab grown meat is going to be a thing. And right now, plant-based meat is already a thing. That's a thing. Yeah. And so food cost is going to be increased exponentially, particularly through traditional means of getting food. So if you're used to going to the supermarket and buying your box of whatever, I think that price is going to go up substantially, or they're going to play the old trick, which they've been playing already, if you haven't noticed, which is you get the box looks the same, but if you look at the ounces, you go, I thought this was 16 ounce. Why is it 12 ounce now the same price? Yeah, right. That's like a masking inflation that's happening already. Sure. So those things from the food standpoint are they're a given, because the powers that be they've already made it very clear that they want to control how you eat. You know what I mean? And it's less meat, and it's a safer food system, in their mind. You know what I mean? That's part of the Great Reset. I don't know if you've been paying attention to that, but that's a part of that Great Reset model. That's a really scary thing that a bunch of powerful lizards have came up with, like I said, and really you didn't get a vote on it. I don't have a representative at the table, but they have a plan to reset things that they're going to enact through power and money and influence. So it's, those things we have to pay attention to. I'm very concerned. I mean, it doesn't make me a favorable guy, but I'm very concerned about a civilization that is totally geared towards the idea of equity and equality of outcome, because again, it's that same sort of compassion. I get the compassion. We don't want anybody to fall through the holes. And then the other the other side of it, which is, if you're not incredibly thorough with how you try to pull a massive thing like that off, you're going to create chaos in the population. You're going to reinvigorate racism in the nation, and those things. It's a very lofty goal and a very dangerous goal. And I think from a civil unrest standpoint, we're going to see that. We're going to see the effects of that. We're going to see people who have been disenfranchised by that goal, not just the goal, but how it's being handled, right? Like the idea that you're going to take something as big as that and hand it off to mayors and governors of states who are going to hand it off to people to create programs that it's a big deal. And it's just a hashtag to most people.
Yeah.
And I understand why, and I understand their idea behind it, and the the desire. I get it, but it's also well-intentioned people can have a serious effect on the stability of the nation. So those are two of the biggest outside of just the obvious. I don't know how we get back to the level of economic prosperity we had before the pandemic, which is we're going to have to answer to that too. People are out of work, businesses are going to close and never open again. Lots of them already have. And, it's a ripple effect. It touches everything. It doesn't not only touches the working population, but I think we'll see it touch entire towns and cities. Where a town or a city could literally go Detroit on us if we're not careful, where it's like, there's no restaurants anymore. There's no, this industry, the clubs all shut down. Why would I move there? And that's all it takes. Once enough people decide, why would I move there? Or I'm moving out of here. That's when those cities and those towns can collapse very quickly.
Similar to California now.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're going to see it. They got Hollywood power. So LA will probably be okay. But I don't know, though. LA's already suffering from massive homelessness. Yeah. They've got issues.
Seems like everybody's running out of there.
They could very well be the spot that sees almost like a French Revolution sort of episodic scenario take place where literally poor homeless people just in mass head up the hills of Hollywood and start killing people. I mean, it sounds crazy and like a movie, but
no, not really.
If it were going to happen somewhere, that'd be the place, right? That is the greatest. It's got to be the greatest imbalance that exists, is people just lining the streets of Rodeo and watching people with crystal and diamond everything walk before them, buy their Louis Vuittons and head back up to the hills. It's a scary situation, man.
Well, let's timestamp this episode, and we could follow back up on this if it does happen. We're like, hey, James was right, 1,000%. Foreshadowed it.
James, unfortunately, when James is right, it's never good. I wish I was one of those guys who could be like, bet on cannabis stocks and you'll be a millionaire like me. That's what I wish I was, but I'm just a guy with the bad news most of the time.
Hey, that's usually the guy that's most informed, though. So
yeah.
I guess my wife would kill me if I don't bring this up. Disaster Coffee. She's a huge coffee drinker. Fun fact, she's also a baker herself. Cool. But Disaster Coffee, is that your brand name? How did it come about?
Man, I didn't know we were talking Disaster Coffee. Thank you, Jose.
I would have to. She would not let me slide off this interview if I didn't bring up the coffee.
Well, I'll send you guys some. Make sure we talk after. But so can we go entrepreneurial a little bit?
I would love it. Absolutely.
Okay. So I bought the Prepper Broadcasting Network in 2018.
Okay.
I podcasted on it since about 2012. Once it became mine, I got to sort of understand the struggle, and you're a podcaster, you might understand it as well, the struggle of finding sponsorship. Yep. I wanted it to be a viable income source for me. That was part of the deal. And before Facebook turned into the, social media Nazis, a lot of guys that I got to give those guys a call now too. I could probably have a good laugh with them. But anyway, a lot of the guys that I thought I could reach out to and get sponsorship deals with, nothing outrageous, but sponsorship deals for our little podcast prepping network. They were very honest to me, which I appreciated. And they said, if we do an ad on your show, we're going to hit some people, but we don't know how many, and we don't know the demographic. I mean, you can tell us, but it's kind of tough. With Facebook, we can target thousands, tens of thousands of people, all in the right demographic, and we know when it's working, and we know when it's not.
Right.
And that was a hit.
Yeah.
Because that screwed my plans up. So I started thinking to myself, to hell with these guys. Why don't we create our own brand that will be our own sponsor?
Nice.
Like instead of reaching out to a sponsor, if we can make a sponsor that's viable and has enough success that we're making money, then what's the difference between that and having a sponsor? I have one less person to answer to, and I was already on this track of, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur in this day and age, and I'm going to be a gun-toting one, I don't want to answer to anybody, because the moment you got to answer to people, you got to start cutting and making changes, and I can't say this and that, and I talk for a living, you can't be in the business of what I'm not going to say. So Disaster Coffee was born out of some research about drop shipping coffee companies and what could be done for a guy who was already kind of working full time, didn't have time to take on a full, scale business. And it really became my means of not just creating a great product in a drop shipped coffee product out of California that is, well, you'll see when you get it. I drank coffee before Disaster Coffee, but I never understood having coffee roasted and then sent to you, which is super rare with the way people drink coffee. Even the biggest and the most impressive coffee companies that roast coffee. There's a fundamental misstep in how they do it, right? They roast coffee and then they inventory coffee. And then it gets, it either stays in a warehouse until an order gets shipped, like anything else.
Sure.
Or it goes to a retailer, right? That's where you sell coffee. I go buy it at the supermarket or whatever. Maybe go to a 5-11 store and get Black Rifle. But inherently, there's a middleman between you and the coffee. When you drop ship coffee, and this is really only a coffee thing, I guess. When you drop ship coffee, it doesn't sit anywhere. So when you order from Disaster Coffee, the roaster gets your order. They roast all their orders for the day. Then they throw all their orders on a pallet that's shipped direct to the customers. And in my opinion, you can't even do coffee better than that. It's impossible. And when you get it, when it comes to your mailbox, you're going to walk up to your mailbox and open it, and it's going to hit you.
Nice.
It hits you. It's like, whoa, there's coffee in here.
Yeah.
And it's outstanding, man. And I just, when I set out to do this thing, I didn't plan on that. I didn't even understand that level. That's like second level effect.
Sure.
I didn't understand that. And now that I've been drinking coffee that way we started in December of last year.
Yeah.
Now that I've been drinking coffee for a year that way, it's like, this is the way,
Yeah.
This is the way for sure. So a portion of our profits goes to, we donate to two organizations in particular. One is Citizens Assisting Citizens, which is a national organization that shows up and does disaster relief.
Okay.
That was my initial game plan, right? Disaster Coffee, disaster relief. All of our coffees are named after some kind of either disaster relief or disaster in and of itself, right?
Nice.
So last year we kind of tongue in cheek put out a pandemic blend, right? 6 bean espresso.
I love it.
It is our infectious pandemic blend.
That's master marketing.
And that was a great hit. Yeah, it was a great a great move. But we got wrapped up with another great prepper named Bear Independent.
Okay.
And he has an organization called Grindstone Ministries. And Grindstone Ministries builds these rehab centers for victims of child trafficking.
Wow.
So they build chapels at these rehab centers, and it's appalling. But he tells me the average age is 14 years old. The people who are at these rehabs. They're 14-year-old kids. So
it's crazy.
We send them money also. We're small, so we don't send them the amount of money we want to, but every little bit helps when you're doing that kind of thing. So that's our overarching motivation to do what we do also, is to take a little bit of that money that we make and put it towards disaster relief, and now this fighting this monster of human trafficking, which is just outstanding that it can even exist in a time like this.
Right. It's scary to think about. I have 2 girls, and I have 4 kids total, which could all fall victim to something like that. But specifically, I think about my girls for sure. And it's a scary thing. It's a scary
thought, man. Yeah, and we also have a prepper-based product called Bunker Beans. And what Bunker Beans are is a 5-pound bag of green unroasted coffee beans.
Okay.
Green coffee beans are, first of all, they're hard to get in 5-pound or less denominations. You can buy them like 60-pound bags, but they store basically forever.
Oh, nice.
Right. If you bucket them up like you would rice or beans, if you put them in Mylar bags so they're protected from bugs, maybe throw an oxygen absorber in there and put them in a 5-gallon bucket, they're going to be around basically forever, and they don't become coffee until you roast them. So once you roast a green coffee bean, it's not even caffeinated until you roast it. I didn't know that. That's new coffee business ownership stuff you find out.
That's the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So it's not even a caffeinated thing until you roast it, but it gives you the opportunity to store some of these green beans for the long haul. And, once your coffee stash is gone, which would be a dark day in and of itself, you could pull these things out, roast them. If you have a hand grinder, which would be optimal, you could hand grind the beans down into coffee and make coffee. And we've done many shows on coffee as a morale booster in disaster. Trust me, it's something you want to have around.
Yeah.
Whether a tornado whips through a neighborhood and takes everybody's house, or, if the lights go out and never come back on, you definitely want to be the guy who can make the coffee and say, we're going to be okay. It's all right.
That.
Yeah.
Somewhere I hear, I can feel my wife just like pumping it up in the background, because I don't drink much coffee, but she's avid.
Oh, well, she's a baker. I mean, coffee and sweets that's what it's all about.
It's a good mix. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm actually intrigued by the network that you got going on. Is that the only way you've been able to incentivize your creators? Because I'm starting to build a network, and I got a few podcasters on there, and I'm having a hard time scratching the surface on how, besides cross promotion for each other's products, I'm having a hard time finding a way to incentivize them to continue to stay on the network, of course.
Yeah. So when I did this thing early on with a different owner, it was a revolving door, but we were never short-staffed. The people who podcast on my network, they're completely volunteer. Okay. They do it completely. I don't make anywhere near enough money to pay people to podcast. But what I do is I pay the bills to podcast, and I pay the bills to promote and all that kind of stuff. So there are inherent benefits to it for sure for them. What I find works best for me and to keep them going. And one thing that I should mention is we've had the same core group since 2018 when I bought the network, which is, I didn't see that coming. That is not, I thought for sure we'd be rifling through people. So what I find is to meet with them on a regular basis, as a group and as individuals, and to push them to take advantage of the resource that they have, which is their podcast. They're very passionate about what they do, or else they wouldn't waste a night of their life doing it. Right. We also podcast live, and that's another level of addiction. You know what I mean? Like, podcasting is sweet, but going live with a live chat room it's another thing. You know what I mean? There's a high wire aspect of it. You're talking about controversial topics always, because of the nature of what you're talking about. Right. And I know that many of them are addicted to that. And it's nice to get that stuff out of your system when times are tough. I'm sure you enjoy that about podcasting, being able to sound off here. So there are a lot of benefits for them, but I'm always pushing them. And I think that's why they stick with me, to keep going and keep doing. I have people who write books on the network, side businesses and that kind of thing. So they can use the podcast as a springboard for something bigger, that's always my way of motivating them, as you could, this is cool, but the likelihood that you're going to, especially since I'm already jockeying for for podcast sponsorship money, the likelihood that you're going to have sponsorship money that's really going to get you out of your day job is probably pretty low.
Sure.
But one of our hosts is just an astounding crocheter. She's our Saturday night host, Jordan Smith, and she's got tremendous potential to make a lot of money off of her stuff if she can tie it together with her podcast, and just this last year, so we all get together once a year for something called Prepper Camp, which happens in North Carolina, which is a whole nother, I can't even get into it because it's a whole nother show, but she did her first live talk there, and it was about fibers and taking fur from animals, turning it into fibers, turning that into clothes. So she's starting to bridge that gap and turn what she loves and what she does into money for her and her family. And that's the best that I can do for them, is to continually push them in that direction so that they can make that jump maybe one day from working a job to working the job that they want to be working.
Cool. So I kind of got the feeling I'm working in the right direction. That's sort of what I'm doing. I'm just giving them the resources. I have a marketing background. I started a digital marketing company in 2019. So I try to give them like marketing advice and how to get their stuff out. I pay for the hosting on the website, similar to you, all the resources.
I think that,
I maybe in my head, I was thinking.
There's more of a benefit in that than
That's the problem I think I'm having. I think I'm doubting that. And I'm thinking like, how do I get these guys paid? If not, they're going to get the hell out of here.
When I brought the Patriot Power Hour over, which is our newest show, we had a weird conversation where we were both kind of like, how's this going to work? Should this work? Shouldn't this work? Let me let him talk first. Let me let him talk, one of those things. Cause we didn't know where each other was at with it all. I think they weren't sure if I even wanted them on the network, and I wasn't sure, what they expected out of the network. Right. So after we got all the bullshit out of the way and started talking, they were just blown away by the fact that they didn't have to pay me to be on the network. Gotcha. They were like, wait, so we can podcast, we can get rid of all, because they already had a podcast. So they were already paying bills. So we can get rid of all the bills that we were paying. And as a gesture in kind, they created probably about 10 different spots for advertisers and station identification, they're all so cool, They had them professionally done, and that was kind of their olive branch for them jumping on our network. Nice. And those things are invaluable, and especially if you have somebody who's already paying bills. If they're not, I'm sure they'll understand that you got to inherently pay for something. if you don't let Jose pay for it,
Right. Trying to work that out. Yeah. So
have you heard?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I do one more? I'm sorry. The only other big thing I do is I tell them to talk about whatever they want. Yeah. So, it'd be very easy for me to structure our week out as this week we're doing food storage, run with it. You know what I mean? Right. But I tell them, whatever you want to do, just talk about it. If you're passionate about it, talk about it. And we've had shows where we could have easily been shut down. Because, people get passionate, in times like these. So that freedom is important too.
Yeah, I think that's what I love about the medium of podcasting, is that I would hate for it to be censored. I'm actually one of the biggest guys that hates Spotify for everything that they're doing with their, basically just trying to, capitalize on podcasting. It should be an open platform, and they want to put it behind a paywall, which I hate. But yeah, I'm real big on letting the creators do what they have to do for that same reason. It's not my place to tell you to not do it. I would just be, a censor god, if that makes sense. And I don't want to be that. So have you heard of new services like Clubhouse? How do you think they go against podcasting?
Clubhouse. I don't know who they are.
Yeah. So there's I pretty much call it a teleconference app, but there's a new popular app called Clubhouse. And what it kind of is you go into a room and it's basically just a conference call with, thousands of people. Okay. Yeah. So, since it's new and since it's fresh, a lot of these, big timers and, innovators, if you want to call them that, anybody big in any niche and any spaces in there, basically giving free value. So what a lot of people in there are saying is this is going to eliminate podcasting, because now I could not only have one guest, I could have one guest and 1,000 audience members that I can call up and ask questions live on the show. That's the new thing. But to me, it's the beauty of podcasting is on demandness of it. I could get it whenever I want and do it whenever I want.
That's very important. That's a very important aspect of it, man, for sure. You know, what the dangerous thing is to try, and this is what the Prepper Broadcasting was for a long time, was to try to be a radio show. Okay. Right? One of the great laments is I can't take calls, you know? Yeah. We can't take calls on our live shows. We can't take calls on our podcasts that are pre-recorded. But this isn't radio, you know? Right. And there are a lot, like our conversation would have been crap on a radio network. We couldn't have gotten into what we were getting into tonight with, oh, hold on, we got to take another break. Hold on, we'll be back in 10. You know what I mean? So it's the idea that you can't construct a podcast the way a podcast is supposed to be if you have 1,000 guests who are going to say, hold on, let's elaborate on that. You know what I mean? It'll be cool. I'm sure it'll be great on some topics, but, and also there's inherent risk, man. There's a lot of crazy people out there. Yeah. There's a reason why radio hosts who have big contracts have call screeners. You know, you got to have a screener who's going to be there so that somebody doesn't just grab the mic at Clubhouse and say, "You Nazi racist pig, you." Or whatever. Yeah, you know? They got some moderation tools, but I agree with you. It's not cohesive to the conversation to have a lot of people putting their hands up. But I guess technically the moderator could mute anybody at any point in time. Yeah, I'm sure. You can cut them off mid rant, but right. Yeah. It's just that's the word that they keep saying. I think it's just people's usual hurry up factor in trying to replace something with something else. Yeah. But I think podcasting sounds like it's got great potential. Yeah, it's doing good, but podcasting is still in its infancy. I mean, it's one of those. Oh, for sure. Yeah, people are coming more and more every day. You know, I don't know if with the whole quickly, that's a whole nother convo. But there's a Lightning Network thing with Bitcoin where now podcasters are able to get, Satoshis, little pieces of Bitcoin streamed to them as the person is actually listening to it. It's something called Podcast 2.0. Oh. And it's led by Adam Curry, Podfather, I guess is what he goes by. Yeah, I know Adam. Yeah. So I don't know him, but I know the name. Right. So he's pushing this initiative to do that, to basically give all the creators now value for value exchange. And before that was never possible because through the old legacy banking systems, I couldn't really send you 10 cents every 10 minutes or something like that. But now with, Bitcoin and specifically the Lightning Network, I'm able to literally send you these 5 sats or 5 cents per 10 minutes per hour. And it's a pure value for value exchange, and you cut out the Spotify's, you cut out the middlemen, you cut out all those people. Yeah. So that's just an example to me that podcasting still has a long way to go. And for these people to say that Clubhouse is going to eliminate it is very weird. And think about where traditional radio is. I mean, traditional AM radio is definitely not doing good like it was in the early 2000s, but at the same time it's still not tapped out. Yeah, there's still tons of people who listen to AM radio, and it's because they've become accustomed to how they get it. They get it on the drive home, or they get it after dinner, or when they sit on the couch, or whatever it is. And podcasting is the same thing. I mean, I want to be able to throw a podcast on and work out. I want to go run 5 miles and listen to a podcast, or lift weights, and I definitely don't want to be like worried about who's raising their hand or if I'm raising my hand or answering questions, So it'll never be, it's always going to be its own thing for sure. Yeah. There's enough space for everybody, I guess is the point there. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Definitely that. There's plenty of people. Oof. Bill, how many we got? 9 billion or 8 billion? Always looking for some type of stimulation. Yeah. But James, we could talk for hours, I'm sure. Tell the people where they can go to get more information on you, to get information on the network, on prepping. Please give them a call to action. Oh, yeah, sure. It's easy, man. We're easy to find. So prepperbroadcasting.com is the website. There's a podcast player there if you want to do that route. If you're really interested in taking first steps in preparedness or, upgrading, I'd recommend going there because we have services that we offer there also. We have a membership there as well. But if you're just into listening to the podcast, search Prepper Broadcasting Network everywhere, everywhere the podcasts are listened to, we're there. And don't forget disastercoffee.com. Telling you, if you want roasted coffee, fresh roasted, sent directly to your house, not sitting on a shelf. I didn't realize that was a thing, and now that I've kind of stumbled upon it, it really feels like the only way to go. So disastercoffee.com, great coffee and a great purpose.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have all those links in the descriptions. Send them over to me if you haven't already. I know I got a few of them there. But James, this conversation has been incredible. I hope it's not the last time we speak. And I've definitely been waking myself up to a lot of things, a little bit before COVID, but definitely during COVID, as many others. And that's why I was looking forward to this combo, and you didn't disappoint. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it, Jose. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Later.
Thanks for joining me for another great conversation. That one was a really good one, and I can't express this enough. We have to prepare, guys. We don't know what's to come, and if we prepare, we'll be better off in the long run. Our children will be better off in the long run, and we'll be able to handle a lot more of the unforeseeable. As always, I appreciate you guys. If you enjoyed this conversation, please rate, share, and subscribe. That's how I continue to have the conversations I love to have, and you can continue to get the conversations that you love to listen to. As always, guys, take care. Later.